This is Ayani.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
In this episode, we continue our deep dive into the Chinese drama Love Between Fairy and Devil, but this time with spoilers.
We cover the show's multifaceted depictions of love, the scenes that made us cry, and a spicy take about the show's finale.
If you also can't get enough of Fairy Orchid, Dongfang Jinsong, or the absolute himbo gold that is Stupid Black Dragon, let us know on Twitter and Instagram at SexLoveLit.
And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's go. Hello, and welcome back to Sex, Love, Literature. In this episode, we are continuing our discussion of Love Between Fairy and Devil. If you would like to reference our sort of character rundown or introduction of the show, please reference part 1. This is part 2, so we're going to dive right in with the spoilers. So,
boom! Spoilers, they're coming.
What is your spoilery reaction, Ayani?
Oh my gosh, the show was really good. So okay. To be 100% honest, at first I was not sure that I was going to get into it the way that I did. I was kind of giving it a chance because you liked it so much. And I was like, okay, Corinne says it's good. I do trust her judgment. She didn't steer me wrong with a whole bunch of other things. So I'm going to give this a watch. The first 9 episodes, I was kind of like, okay, we'll see how this goes. But once the ride picks up and shit starts going down, it's really good. It's really good. It kind of takes you on a roller coaster. We go through all of these different realms. There's all these different movements. And then they tricked me at the end. So one of the things I really liked about the show, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about the actual breakdown of the kind of movements of the plot. But one of the things that I hope we have a second to talk about is how they kind of bait and switch us with the end of the romance, right? Because in a lot of stories, and I'm not saying that this has to be the way things end, right? But once you have a marriage coming up, once people are getting married, that's pretty much how you wrap things up. But when our two heroes are like, we're going to get married and we love each other, that's when it takes the turn for the most heartbreaking. I cried so much. So we're going to get into that. We're going to break it down, but that's kind of my spoiler-filled reaction. I think I really loved it. I really enjoyed the characters. There are some things that now thinking back on it, I'm like, wait, they never explained that. Wait, they never wrapped that up. But I think the emotional core of it is so strong that it makes it worth watching and worth going on the ride for. What about you? What is your spoiler-filled reaction?
Yeah, so I really love the way that Orchid and Dongfang Jinsong's relationship develops over the course of the drama, which is not super spoilery, but particularly the way that they sort of sacrifice equal amounts for each other. And by the end of their relationship, they start out about as unequal as you can be when it comes to power, when it comes to experience, even when it comes to emotional experience.
Yes,
Orchid has much more. I mean, she has emotions and Dongfang Jinsong doesn't.
No, he does not.
But they become very much equals by the end of the drama in a way I think is very, very skillfully done.
Yeah. I think there's some interesting things happening here with power and power differentials, and playing with people being on similar or different levels. So why don't we go ahead and give a rundown of just the story, the plot, because I feel like as we're moving through conversation, we're going to be moving through kind of different parts of the story, different relationships, different characters, but having some grounding points can be helpful for the conversation.
All right, so let's start by thinking about, now that we can talk about spoilers, the story structure of Love Between Fairy and Devil. So this wasn't super evident to me the first time I saw it, except that I knew that things dialed up to 11 in episode 9. But the show had, and this was pretty clear to me on my second watch, the show has a pretty clear division into about 5 parts that I have now in my head decided to think about as acts, as if this is a play.
That is such an English major thing to do. Oh my God.
I mean, and I think part of the reason that I'm thinking about it this way is because I'm used to thinking of K-dramas in like a 4-act structure because they're divided they're divided into 16 episodes that are pretty clearly like 4, 4, 4, and 4. And because Chinese dramas have they can be many, many more episodes. Like my favorite one is 73 episodes.
Jesus, that's so many episodes.
And I'm talking about the story of Minglan for anyone who also loves Chinese dramas. But they're just longer stories. And I think it can be easy to get lost and be like, oh, it just lasts forever. But that's not actually the case. So like with Love Between Fairy and Devil, I wanted to take us a quick second to think about the story structure of the show.
Okay, so I'm going to burn through these really quickly. The first act is like episode 1 through 9. This takes place in the fairy realm. We meet our main love interests. They get to know each other, and then they, through dramatic circumstances, leave the fairy kingdom and head to act 2 and the Moon Kingdom.
And this is around episodes 10 to 18. This is when Dongfang Chinsong takes Orchid to the Moon Kingdom, to Xiangyang Sea. And in this sequence, we get a lot more growth, particularly on Dongfang Chinsong's part, because, so for context, the reason Dongfang Chinsong is so powerful is because he doesn't have emotions. He has gotten rid of them, and that means that he can use Hellfire, which is the most powerful magic, and he's the only person who has mastered it in the 3 realms. But Orchid, being the grass that she is, in this sequence helps him bring his love tree back to life and sort of deal with his childhood trauma, or begin to deal with his childhood trauma with his father, turning him into an emotionless person. It's a really interesting, it's when Orchid starts to be more closer to being an equal with Dongfang Chinsong as she is doing something for him rather than him trying to keep her alive for his own sake.
And I will say, just as a quick poke, Moon Supreme does not make himself emotionless. That was his daddy, because his daddy is a butthole. And I have very strong feelings about the previous Moon Supreme. But yeah, this is not something that he did to himself, which I think is important, that this was something that was done to him for quote unquote the sake of the Moon Kingdom, which is, I think, an interesting kind of plot turn. So our next kind of act, we have episodes 19 to 25-ish, in which our band of merry thieves, they're not really thieves, but
Jaylee is.
Yeah, Jaylee is. But Black Dragon, Jaylee, Moon Supreme, and Orchid are all doing a plot, doing a scheme in the mortal realm.
And Chang Hong and Fairy Dunyan are also there, but like as mortals.
Yeah, there's this whole thing where like fairies can go through tribulations in the mortal realm, in which they have to.
Do they call them tribulations on Netflix?
Yeah, tribulations.
Oh, and Vicky, they call it like the hardship experience.
Why does that sound like a bad R&B album? Like Drew Hill, the hardship experience. Oh my God. Yeah, no, they're tribulations on Netflix. Well, in which they do have to go through hardships, right? But it's about them having to fulfill the path of the mortal. Like, okay, so really quick for some context. Ideas about fate and destiny are huge in this show. And Orchid, I think we mentioned this in our previous episode, but Orchid, her job is kind of checking and fixing destiny books to make sure that people's destinies are progressing as they are supposed to. So when immortals go through these tribulations, there are certain beats that they have to hit of their destiny. But that makes so many hijinks ensue because people think they know what destiny actually means, and then they don't they get ideas in their head about how certain destinies are supposed to work. And I was losing my mind because, like, how can you all not see that what you think is wrong? But I will not go down that path right now. So that's kind of the third act in the mortal realm. Oh, I guess, should we say that they were looking for the immortal spirit of the old fairy war god Chidi?
Yeah, so one of the threads of the show, and I think something that is important, is that the first war god Chidi, so Changhan's predecessor of the fairy realm, is the one who originally defeated Dongfang Chinsong 30,000 years ago, and she has been having a rough old time.
Ooh, because poor girl, man.
Because she died, or was supposed to die, but her student Rong Hao, who is in the present day Changhong's bestie, but also in fact an evil son of a bitch.
That's not what I thought you were gonna say. That's funny.
But so he has been trying to bring back his master, whom he loves, through any means necessary. And I think one of the questions that is at the center of this drama is, like, what do you do, and what is it okay to do when your love has, like, been lost? And Rong Hao, with the lengths he goes to save Chidi, I think is sort of the example of, like, going too far and not thinking about what your loved one would have wanted.
Yeah, what they would have actually wanted. Yeah.
But so there are a number of characters here, including Dongfang Chingsong, including Rong Hao, who, like, want to get the primordial spirit of Chidi to use for their own ends. Yeah. And I think the Mortal Realm sequence is probably my favorite, because it's when Orchid and Dongfang Chingsong are both starting to realize that they have feelings for each other, but are also realizing that their goals are so wildly at odds from each other that they have no idea how to make that work. Like, because like Dongfang Chingsong wants to wipe out the fairy realm in retribution for what they have done to the Moon Tribe over the years that he's been gone, and also for the many thousands of years of enmity between them before that. And Orchid, on the other hand, while she has been kicked out of the fairy realm and they think she's a spy, they're wrong. She's not a spy. The spy is someone else. She doesn't want Dongfang Chingsong to, do a genocide. So she's opposed to that. Understandably.
Yeah. It's a really layered and interesting section of the show. I think it might be my favorite too, actually.
I think it also has the most hijinks, because so we have Chidi, the first god of war, who ends up basically in love with Dongfang Chinsong as her mortal self, because she sort of recognizes that she knows him because he killed her, but she doesn't know that's why. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but
yeah, I was gonna say, he didn't kill her. He
didn't kill. So he hit her with hellfire, and hellfire leaves a mark throughout all of your reincarnations. But she died in her final confrontation with Dongfang Chinsong. Yes. I'll say
they were legendary enemies. Let's say, if Orchid is his legendary love, then Chidi is his legendary enemy.
Yeah, and then Changhong, on the other hand, who we should say is in love with Orchid. So Orchid thinks, and we'll talk more about their relationship, but Orchid thinks she's in love with Changhong at the beginning, and she's not. It's just that she doesn't know anybody. So, but Changhong does know Orchid and is in love with her, but thinks the best way to protect her is to keep his distance. And because of that, he loses her.
Yeah.
But he, as his goofy-ass mortal self, who I thought was adorable, but also the worst, is in love with Fairy Orchid as a mortal.
But we could stay and talk about the mortal realm for a long time. Let's get through the last two acts, and then we can keep going.
So then the fourth act, we go back to the Moon Kingdom, and then this is when things start to get serious.
To put it lightly, yeah.
Yeah. But so this is when Orchid and Dongfang Chingsong's relationship really gets serious. And this is sort of when they fake you out, and you think it's going to end in a wedding, and it does not. Instead, it ends in a funeral. a death.
That's not funny, but the way you said it. She's not wrong, though. And this is not the reaction I had when it happened. I was very upset.
So that's sort of the like fake out ending. And then the sort of fifth act is after Orchid comes back as the goddess, and then things ensue with people pretending they know things or don't know things or whatever. And then we get to the sort of grand finale with Dongfang Qingsong sacrificing himself to change Orchid's fate.
Through the power of love.
As one does.
I feel like we're rushing through the plot. There's just so one of the hard things about talking about fantasy, right, which I think Corinne and I will both appreciate, is that there's so much that happens, and it's like you want to give context for it all, but you can't possibly give context for it all in an analysis. Like it's not beneficial, especially if you all, have already watched it. But anyhow, long story short, I imagine that they live happily ever after as fairy and devil.
Yeah, so I guess that was some context with a little bit of analysis mixed in.
Right.
But I do think, so thinking back on the show in its entirety, one of the things that is very important and that we wanted to talk about is this relationship between Dongfang Qingsong and Orchid that the story turns around as the core of the story. Because, like, as we sort of mentioned, the power dynamics between the two of them are constantly shifting. The amount of respect that they have for each other is also, like, grows over time.
Yeah.
Because, like, at the beginning, I'm not even sure if Dongfang Qingsong really sees Orchid as a person or as an annoyance.
I mean, definitely as an annoyance, but the person I think is questionable.
And then there's also, and this is actually something that I think the show does really well, but thinking about the ways that magic is used and deployed in various ways to sort of like level the playing ground between them a lot of the time. So like, for example, I do want to talk about the heart curse and how that works.
Sure, yeah, we can start there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the heart curse, for some context, is this curse that Orchid accidentally puts on Dongfang Qingsong when she releases him from prison and wakes him up. And as part of this curse, this is partially what enables the body swapping when they kiss and also get struck by lightning at the same time. Totally normal thing to happen.
Happens to me all the time.
But also, like, he feels everything that she feels. And also, like, if she is injured, so like if she gets a cut on her wrist, he'll get a cut on his wrist in the same place. And what else? Is there anything else that the heart curse does? Oh, if she tells him to do something, if she like gives him a command, he has to do it. So this is really interesting and important at the beginning of the drama because, first of all, Moon Supreme, who has no emotions, is used to like killing anyone who gets in his way and like is fine with it. He feels no guilt. He feels nothing. He's just making logical decisions about what he wants to do for the good of the Moon Tribe. So, but because of the heart curse, he can't just kill Orchid.
Right. He can't get rid of her. And that makes their relationship kind of interesting because it feels like for a lot of it in the beginning, he wants to do nothing more than like throw her off the edge of Arbiter Hall, and never see her again, be done with her. But the story uses the heart curse as a way to start to build his affection for her even before his emotions are completely awakened, right? So he figures out she is a special plant, right? What is it? Jishan?
Yeah, he figures out that she's a grass of Jishan because the particular spell that she puts on him brings like the seal of Zishan up. So like he recognizes that she's from like a clan that has supposedly been exterminated.
Right. And through that he finds out how to cultivate a plant from Jishan and starts doing all these things for her, like bringing her to the best sunshine in all of the fairy realm and getting her fresh dew that has not touched the ground and doing all these really doting things with an air of malice, with an air of anger. But you can see through these interactions how he starts to change his opinion of her, even though a lot of it is kind of like, she's an annoying plant and I wish I could just throw her off the edge of this building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there's an exchange that I have very early on. And I think it's understandable that Orchid gets really confused about why this sinful immortal that she thinks she is like hanging around. She's like, I let you out of prison. Why are you hanging out in my house?
Yeah.
Could you leave, please?
Could you go?
But he like tells her like, oh, like, I would love nothing more than to kill you, but you are as important to me as my life. And he means that literally, but she is, she understands when he's like, but like, why though?
Yeah, she has quite a few moments where she's like, but I don't like you that way. I like Chong Hong, so please leave. Please go somewhere. Or turn yourself in so you go back to prison. That's also fine.
But I also think something that is very interesting here is the way that the curse gives Dongfang Chinsong the ability to read Orchid's mind and feel her emotions. Because at the beginning, that is very important, I think, to him starting to develop or redevelop empathy, to sort of like recognize emotions like, oh, like Orchid is sad. I would like to make her less sad. Or like Orchid is happy, so like what can I do to make her more happy? Like he has that whole like, I will make her the happiest woman in the world, and then the joke on Tumblr was like, but in parentheses, derogatory. But like as they start to develop more of a relationship beyond one forced by the heart curse, that then becomes an intrusion for Dongfang Chinsong to have this access to how Orchid feels about things that she hasn't really consented to give him.
Right. Well, one way that they do mitigate that, though, there's a lot of like magic items and magic props in this show. And it's not like they pull them out of thin air, right? But it kind of feels like sometimes that when a magic prop is needed to make things work, there's a magic prop that can make it work. So Orchid is able to get the like emotion hiding hairpin.
Yeah, they call it in the Viki subtitles, at least, they call it the heart hidden hairpin.
Yeah, I think it might be the heart hidden hairpin or something like that. But what it does pretty much is that it disguises her thoughts as long as she's wearing it, so that Moon Supreme can't read her mind or feel her emotions.
Well, I think one of the things of the drama, that is one of the ways in which the drama is very smart in the way that Dongfang Chinsong and Orchid's relationship is developing, because like they do have this whole conversation where Orchid almost dies because she gets kidnapped. This happens a lot. You get used to it. And he gets extremely angry because he's like, I told you not to leave. Like, I told you not to go anywhere. I told you to stay by my side. If you hadn't been wearing this stupid hairpin, then they wouldn't have gotten you, because I would have known something was wrong. And she's like, well, like, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong to leave or whatever, but also like people deserve to have secrets. So like, I'm not taking it off. And this is like an ongoing sort of, not always a point of contention, but like a thing that Dongfang Chinsong continues to grapple with. And I think one of his big moments of growth is in the mortal realm, when they are in this sort of like, will they, won't they phase, where they both definitely have feelings for each other, but haven't quite acknowledged them either to each other or to themselves, where he like wants to know for sure what Orchid is feeling, where he almost replaces the heart hidden hairpin with a dupe, with a swap. Yeah, with a fake. So that Orchid won't know. And then he ends up deciding not to. And that was just such a huge moment of growth for him as a character individually, and also towards them respecting each other in their budding relationship. Yeah.
I will say, though, while it hides her emotions and her mind, they still have the bodily connection.
Oh, yeah.
Or I should say the one-way bodily connection. And the show does play with that, in that Moon Supreme will want to stop Orchid from doing things that will hurt her, harm her body, etc. He still kind of uses it as like, oh no, she's been cut, something is wrong kind of a thing. But also there are some moments, I mean, I'm not being coy because I'm avoiding spoilers, but more like, you know, we don't necessarily need to get into all the plot beats, right? But there are moments where she purposefully puts herself in harm's way in order to protect him, or, you know, to gain respect or things like that. And then he makes decisions about how he bears the pain of her bearing pain as well, which were kind of interesting character moments.
Well, so actually, I think it's worth talking very briefly, maybe as a
Okay.
sort of wrap up to this conversation about how they come to
Yeah.
respect each other as equals with the Fuju Cave sequence.
Sure.
So, like, the instance that I think Ayani was referring to
It
is
is.
in order to become the Moon Queen, because she's from the fairy realm, Orchid has to suffer in the Fuju Cave, which is like, it's this like magical ritual thing. It's horrible. It's like the worst thing she could ever, or anyone could ever experience. But because of this enmity between their tribes, the ancestral like founder of the Moon Tribe has like declared that for a fairy to become the Moon Queen, she has to suffer through the Fuju Cave trial for 3 days or whatever. And Dongfang Chingsong is not about it. He like wants to, at this point they want to marry each other. Like they love each other. They've acknowledged this. It's very cute. But his meddling brother is like, absolutely not. I do not want this fairy as my Moon Queen. So his
brother is so annoying, and yet I love him, but I hate him.
He's very cute and I love him, but also I wish he would go away sometimes. But so it ends with Dongfang Chingsong being like, absolutely not. I will bear all the suffering. You do not have to suffer to be with me, which I think is a really important way that their relationship, from some of the reading I've done, like in this genre, most of the time characters do have to suffer to like earn the right to be with like a particular character.
Oh, interesting.
And this drama, I think, was very pointed in making a distinction between Orchid having to suffer to like earn the right to be with Dongfang Chingsong versus the way that she chose, because she chooses to do it.
Right.
But it's to earn the right to be the Moon Queen and earn the respect of the Moon Tribe in the face of this like thousands of year grudge between these two peoples.
Right. But Moon Supreme already loved her. It wasn't about doing this for him.
Yeah.
Which I think you're right is kind of an important distinction.
And I think one of the lines that really has stuck with me from this drama is like when Dongfang Chingsong was going to propose to Orchid and then she proposed first. It's very cute. But he like tries to give her all these he tries to give her all these like expensive gifts and like to like prove his devote. It's like a very ritualized sort of like proposal situation. But in this conversation that they have later that day, Orchid is like, I don't want any fancy gifts, like you're enough, like, but what I want is respect for my choice. And I think that's really when they sort of like are finally on the same page.
It takes them a long time to get there, but I think it's really satisfying when they do. Which is why the fact that they can't just be together at that point in the story is very heartbreaking.
Like you think they've finally made it, and then the plot intervenes.
And the plot's like, haha, we sent the turtle god to tell you this wasn't going to happen, and you all didn't listen to the turtle god. You thought it would be happiness. So what do you think? I'm going to ask you this live on air. We can talk a bit about the turtle god and kind of, quote unquote, my destiny is to save the world. Or we can kind of turn to thinking about love between fairy and devil and what that can mean more broadly in the story's context. So part of the reason I'm asking this out loud is because there's really so much in this show that we could have done a miniseries, I think, on love between fairy and devil. You know, so I want to make sure that we're touching on the things that we want to touch on while also recognizing that we do not want this to be a 2-hour episode.
Yeah, so I think, or maybe, so going back to this question of like the importance of fate and where love fits into fate, there's this really sort of, so at first, I like kind of was super irritated at Orchid's master for bouncing for 1,000 years and leaving Orchid alone in Arbiter Hall.
But it wasn't her fault.
I know, but like I didn't know it wasn't her fault. But once I knew it wasn't her fault, like we start to see more flashbacks with the Arbiter and with Orchid's relationship with her. And when they have this conversation, because they look at Destiny books all the time and see like all of these stories of mortals doing things that to Orchid don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly because of love. So they have this conversation about like, well, like what, like, is it all just fate? And her master, the arbiter, says like, no, like everything is fate except love. Love is the only thing that isn't fate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Dongfang Chingsong ultimately uses, I think, that loophole almost to change Orchid's fate, because she is supposed, as the sort of almost like a Christ-like figure, she is supposed to die to defeat the evil god, who we haven't mentioned,
Cloud.
And we're not gonna get into that unless we talk about Rong Hao more. But she, like, her destiny and like the destiny of her people and like her ancestors has always been to sacrifice themselves for the good of the realm. And Dongfang Chingsong, it sort of intervenes in that, and
through the power of love,
through the power of love, saves Orchid. And then Orchid, again, through the power of love, because he almost succumbs to the evil god, saves him from the evil god so that they can ultimately defeat I don't know, it's a whole thing. But how did the ending work for you in that respect, Ayani? Like, what did you think?
So I cried a lot. It worked for me. I feel like the ending was perhaps where I could see all of the threads coming together, and it like hit it was the least surprising part of the show for me, if that makes sense. But I think I was already so emotionally wrapped up and invested in all of the characters and all of the storylines. I just wanted Orchid and Moon Supreme to be happy. That I don't know. It worked for me at the end of the journey that I had been on, if that makes sense. I guess the one thing that I wonder about is ultimately the show has a happy ending because he comes back, right? After, what was it, 500 years, he returns because there was a piece of his primordial root left. And, you know, I'm not 100% sure I wanted that. I didn't not want it.
Yeah, that's kind of a hot take, but I don't.
Yeah. I just, this show was such an emotional journey for me. And it was so much about loss and letting go and like, you know, what would my beloved actually want? What do I want? That when he disintegrated, I was like, oh, my heart. But then we do a time jump and I'm like, oh, well, he's coming back. So they're going to be happy, which like on one hand makes me happy because they went on this whole journey. But it also just makes me think about all the other people that have lost in the show. I don't know. I don't know if it would have been better or worse had he not come back. I might have been singing a whole different tune. I might have been like, how could they not make him come back? How could they make them go through all this? Right. And as you said earlier, Orchid and Moon Supreme often mirror each other in their stories, you know? So I don't know that I'm not quite sure how I feel. I made a spicy take and then was kind of like, maybe, but we also didn't get to see them kind of enjoying that happiness either. So I wonder if I would have been happier to have just been left on the, like, she's waiting for him to come back and then the wind blows through it and it's like, he might return soon someday rather than him actually appearing.
That's kind of interesting that, because I mean, I was satisfied with the ending, and I think the sort of poeticness of Orchid sacrificing herself for him and then him sacrificing himself for her also like worked really well. Also, really quickly, we don't have to talk about it, but like, I am a sucker for the trope, even though while I don't always love it, of like someone deciding that the thing that they have to do is convince their partner that they don't love them anymore.
Oh,
so
God.
Like,
it's so heart-wrenching.
So like Dongfang Chinsong pretending that he didn't really love Orchid to save her life, and then Orchid pretending as the goddess that she doesn't love or remember Dongfang Chinsong when she's just trying to prevent him from suffering at her ultimate death, just like tugs on. Like, I know we always say like in stories like if they just talk to each other, but also like I understand the reasons they didn't.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think it would be interesting to think about what this drama would be like if it had ended as a tragedy. And I did feel like, okay, so I was pretty sure it wouldn't, because apparently the series that it's part of, the Sweet On series, has happy endings. Like, that's its deal. But in Chinese dramas, tragic endings are a possibility. Like, they don't have happy endings always the same way that we do a lot of the time in Western stuff.
And I'm not saying it needed to be a tragedy, right? But more that leaving it on the whisper of his return rather than the confirmation of his return. I'm wondering how that might have sat with me overall. You know, bittersweet rather than happy.
Mm-hmm. So, shifting the conversation a little bit, and we've kind of alluded to this, but while love between fairy and devil obviously refers to Orchid and Dong song, I think it also refers to the love between various other characters, and I think in a lot of this show is an investigation of the many kinds of love. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of those other relationships, how they are important to the show, and what they tell us about love, as the second word in our podcast indicates that we do sometimes talk about.
Yeah, there's not a lot of sex in this one, so we gotta pick something like really sexy.
So I was thinking I'm unhelpful as a person, but I realized that canonically Orchid and Dong Fan song like don't have sex, but also like in my head they totally did at some point. I don't know when, but they definitely did.
Maybe when they were preparing to be married, like, 'cause they were probably sleeping in the same bed at that point, right? She wasn't like going back to Arbiter Hall at night, like, okay, bye. No.
And there is a way in which, because of the way that censorship works in Chinese dramas, sometimes sex does need to be like a lot more implied. Also, like, I'm clearly just being very dramatic here because I don't actually think that was really done in this drama, but also like it happened and I don't know when, but it did.
My point still stands, though. The next thing we talk about needs to be like a bodice ripper to make up for the first part of our tagline. But on the second part of our title, rather, yeah, it was funny because when I was watching it, you actually texted me that love between fairy and devil can mean many characters. And I was like, oh, who else is going to fall in love with each other? So we, of course, have Geely and Black Dragon, which often is a topic of conversation for just Corinne and I in life, because Black Dragon is the best. I love him. He is like a golden retriever turned man dragon.
Oh, he's so cute. He's just, because you think he's going to be like the scary evil henchman, and then he's just like a cute little puppy dog.
Yeah, he's really sweet. And then falls in love for like, I mean, she's great. She's great. She's great. I like Jaylee a lot, but she is a spy.
Yes.
She's a spy for an evil third kingdom that we don't talk about, how she really, because this story is so big. It's so big. But she's doing a spy and she's telling everybody, well, not everybody, she's telling the leader of the Heishi about what Orchid and Moon Supreme are doing, and she keeps meddling and doing all this stuff. And Black Dragon is like, but I like being tricked by you. Won't you marry me and be my dragon wife? So it's interesting, though. Well, you know what? Before I go down that path, do you have any feelings about Black Dragon and Jaylee?
So, just like from the top, I will be clear, a Jaylee apologist.
It's because you're also a spy.
Look, she started stealing things and saying that the only thing she cared about was money from day one. So,
I mean, you're not wrong. She was very upfront and honest about that.
But, so I think their relationship is really interesting, and perhaps one of the things that I do wish the drama had spent more time with at the very end is have some sort of apology or a longer process of reconciliation at the end, because I think there are differences in the degrees of harm that Jaylee does to the to Black Dragon and to characters through her spy ways. Like when she steals stuff sometimes, that's just her thing, and you just kind of have to deal with that. But when she like is involved in Orchid getting poisoned, and then also she's involved in something that makes Orchid in a lot of danger, and then when she like is involved unwittingly in Black Dragon's poisoning, I think that's when she starts to actually feel really guilty about her action. I think she's a really complicated character, and I think because of that, her relationship with Black Dragon is really interesting because she is not evil, but she is definitely problematic, and Black Dragon is just like a puppy. So.
Right. And yeah, I agree with you. I really do think it would be nice if there was a longer like reconciliation process. Part of the reason I feel like it's a little skipped over is that Orchid is pretending that she doesn't have memories, and she's like, I don't know who you are. Our friendship is in the past. So there is not that chance to be like, wow, you really hurt me, you know, do better in the future kind of a thing, because she's pretending not to know anyone. And then by the time we figure out that it actually is Orchid in there, big sacrifices are happening. So the friendship, I guess, kind of takes the back seat, you know?
Yeah. So also Geely is also Orchid's best friend. So in addition to being Black Dragon's love interest, she's also Orchid's bestie. So like she betrays everyone.
Yeah. But what makes her story also somewhat interesting is that she is the product of love between fairy and devil. Turns out that she and Fairy Denyon, who I talked a bit about earlier as being the best, are twin sisters, separated at birth because her daddy fell in love with a Moon Tribe woman. And of course, that's not okay. They're not supposed to. Well, I guess there's the sex, right? There are two babies that happened. But you're not supposed to be fucking around with, you know, people from the other tribe or the other communities. So there's a whole bunch of drama around that. Through that, Diane's father becomes indebted to the bad man that is also the one who Jaylee is spying for. And I thought that was kind of an interesting twist. I appreciated it. I totally thought the wrong person was the twin, and Kryn was like, "How would you even think that person?"
I'm pretty sure the actress who plays Jaylee plays Jaylee's mom. They just like cover up her little like under eye mole. Yeah, and Naomi was like, "Who's Jaylee? What does she have to do with it?"
I didn't quite say that. But yeah, so that was, I thought, a fun way to kind of connect Jaylee to some of the goings on in the fairy realm, especially to my homegirl, Fairy Danyan. And
I think that was, so the show does a lot of work to emphasize the harm on everyone that this like ongoing war between the two kingdoms has caused pretty much everyone. And I think because one of the reasons Jaylee is like a spy and like kind of a bitch is because she has like grown up as an orphan, as someone with no one to watch her back, who is constantly being betrayed by everyone all the time, so that the only thing that she says that she loves and trusts is money. So like by showing that like her life is a result of this rift between the two tribes, I think I think that's something else that the show is adding to, I don't know, the sort of weight of like the harm that this is causing.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. Yeah. And then also to bring that into like very explicit relief, you have the comparison of Danyan's life as kind of like the rich, pampered, mean girl, and Jaylee, who had to suffer her entire existence, but also in a way how they treated Orchid, right? Because even though Jaylee was kind of scamming Orchid there, you know, taking her life savings to give her snake oil cures, you know, Danyan was outright kind of mean to her, you know, and changed her tune once, you know, Orchid saved her life during the fairy exam. But
also a note that I continue to think is one of the most hilarious things about Fairy Danyan's character, and like the moment I was like, oh, like maybe I don't maybe you're not like a boring mean girl, is when Changhang is like the only one who thinks that Orchid isn't a spy, and Fairy Danyan is the only one who goes and like to see him and is like, yeah, she's not a spy. Like, I hate her and she's annoying, but like she's definitely not a spy. I still hate her though, but
yeah, she's still the worst. So yeah, to kind of round out this part of the discussion a little bit, the show does a good job of talking about the legacies of pain that get in the way of love and loving relationships, which I think is very well done. You know, it was funny because I didn't like Dunyan's father for most of the thing. I was like, you're ineffectual. You're just here. You just go along with what the leader of the fairy kingdom says and try to get your daughter out of trouble. But towards the end, when you find out kind of what he went through and how he tried to protect the mother of his children and all that kind of stuff, I was actually really, I don't know, touched with how he reacted to finding out that Jaylee was his daughter and bringing her into their home and, you know, saying you guys have to watch out for each other now that I'm going to be condemned to die and all this other different kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and another, we don't have to dwell on it, but I think another sort of like love between fairy and devil relationship that is important to the show is like the friendship between Orchid and Black Dragon, because it's not the show isn't just about Orchid and Dongfang Chinsong. It is also about Orchid developing relationships and friendships with Geely, who's in the Moon Tribe, with Black Dragon, with even with Dongfang Chinsong's annoying little brother. Like it's sort of about building bridges at all levels, not just in her romantic relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are a lot of other very interesting kind of friendship relationships in this story. I know I keep coming back to Danyan, but it's because she's one of my favorites. So she, in the beginning, I think, as we've mentioned, is in love with Changhang and makes some decisions that are perhaps not the best for the greater good, but are based on her jealousy around his feelings for Orchid and her feeling like she's not able to kind of get in his good graces in the way that she wants. But over the course of the show, they really develop a friendship that is not based around her like romantic desires for him, but about respecting each other as people and the lengths that they will go for the people that they care about. And one of the fun parts of the show is that they both go on their tribulation to the mortal realm at the same time. And Fairy Danyan becomes Changhang's mortal bestie, but she's a dude.
Yeah. There is this very hilarious moment where like, I mean, it's because Geely recognizes Fairy Danyan as her sister or like as someone she should know, but doesn't like actually recognize who she is. So she like has like a flirtation with Fairy Danyan as like Cricket, the mortal boy or the mortal man. And there's this is like an aside, but there's this very hilarious, well, two hilarious moments. One where Geely and Black Dragon is like super jealous of Geely being into Cricket. And he's like, but I am the most stupid. Because she's like, oh, I like him because he's so stupid. And he's so offended by this. And like she always calls him stupid Black Dragon. And it is very difficult for me to refer to Black Dragon as anything besides stupid Black Dragon because that's his name in my head. But the other is when Orchid tells Geely that like, you know that Cricket is like a lady fairy in the fairy realm, right? And Geely's like, I don't care, it's fine. And I was like, I don't know how, but this is gay somehow. Like Geely has like a lot of chaotic bisexual energy, I think, even if it is not canonical. Like that is who she is in my head.
But I support it, and I support you in your headcanons. Yeah, this is also part of the reason why Danyan is my favorite. Because Cricket is also so very opposite of who she is in the fairy realm that I think it gives her some perspective on who she is and what she wants.
It's very... So it also, I think, is really... The Mortal Realm sequence is very important for everyone, but especially for Fairy Danyan and especially for Changhang to decide to figure out who he is and what he wants, because I also think, so we've mentioned Chong Hong a number of times, but we haven't really talked about his function as the second male lead.
Oh yeah, let's talk about it.
So I don't know, what did you what was your first impression of Chong Hong, and like how did he sort of how did your impression of him change throughout the show?
So you all can't see my face, but I just rolled my eyes because, like, he could not compare to the Moon Supreme from the beginning. He's very straight-laced. He's very, like, my big brother says I have to do the war god thing, so that's what I'm going to do. And one trope that I personally get annoyed about is, like, I'm going to be not so much I already love you and I have to make you not love me, but, like, I've got to pretend that I don't know you and don't like you, even though I love you. So he would do things to purposefully drive Orchid away because he felt like he was protecting her. And I was like, man, she's falling in love with this mean dude over here. You have no chance. So, like, for example, when she passed the fairy exam with flying colors, he was like, you're a good fairy. Here's this magical rock that I have. And she was like, wow, magic rock. I'm so excited. But then he, like, crosses her name off the list of fairies that can work in, like, in the capital, let's say, right? Because he's like, I've got to make sure that Orchid and I have distance from each other. So he's like actively meddling in her life and in her happiness because he thinks that's the right thing to do. But then she's miserable and constantly feels like she's getting mixed signals from him and all this kind of stuff. So, like, I didn't like him in the beginning. I thought he was boring, but he got so much more interesting after his tribulations in the mortal realm because he was like, wait, no, the way we do things is fucked. And now I see that, and now I'm going to try to be better and be different. So I liked him a lot more after that kind of mid-sequence. What about you?
I'm more going to compare the first time I watched the drama to the second time I watched it, because it was really interesting the second time around, knowing where his character ends up, seeing how he begins, because there are a lot of ways in which he is the hero of he's not the hero of this drama, but he is the hero of a drama. And he is probably the hero of a lot of dramas in this genre, that these kinds of actions of, like, pushing Orchid away to protect her, because he is engaged. He has a long-standing engagement to the goddess who has disappeared, who, you know, turns out to be Orchid, but nobody knows that at the time. And he, like, does all these things ostensibly to protect her, which in I think other dramas would be rewarded. And in this drama are not, which I think is kind of not a statement on the part of the drama, but a way that the drama is subverting some Xianxia tropes. But I think Chong Hong is interesting because he's never really appealing as a second male lead in opposition to Dongfang Chinsong. But Chong Hong, I think, is interesting because there's a moment when he comes back, because he keeps trying to rescue Orchid. Like, he is the only person, except for Fairy Danyan, who believes that she is not a spy, that because the Dongfang Chinsong, like, rescues Orchid in this very public way that does, in fact, make it look like she is a spy. But he, like, refuses to believe it, keeps trying to rescue her. And something that I like about him is that when she says, no, I'm not going back with you, I'm staying with Dongfang Chinsong, he listens to her, and he does respects what she says. And he, I think, it's like he gets more layers to his personality. Instead of being just, like, the good guy, he, like, gets more interesting and is willing to rebel against his shitty dictatorial older brother.
I hate that man.
But
in a show, he's probably a perfectly fine man in real life. But
something that stood out to me as well on my second watch is when he comes back from the mortal realm, he stands up to his older brother to protect Orchid again, like, in a very public way. And then he has this monologue where he asks to be sent to the fairy guillotine. Do they have that in the Netflix subs?
Oh, they call it the Immortal Killing Pavilion.
Okay, and on Viki they call it the fairy guillotine.
Okay, look, so as a grass, I'm very glad that I got that expression as a grass from watching the Viki, but some of these translations are, like, a lot.
I was like, yeah, sure, like, their method of execution is inspired by the French Revolution. It's fine.
Yeah.
But he says that, like, before before he met Orchid and before he fell in love with her, his life was like the frozen North Sea and didn't have any colors in it. And then after meeting Orchid and after living this mortal life where he had like brothers and like friends and had this whole, and didn't have to live in this sort of like upright, perfect thing that he didn't and couldn't go back to that, and he would literally rather die than have to do that. And I think it just sort of ties into this question, and obviously Changhan doesn't end up dying at all, but especially not at that moment. But I think it ties into this question of like, what do you do when love or when your hope of love is lost? Because that's also when Changhong is dealing with like the reality that Orchid doesn't love him, Orchid isn't coming back, or Orchid is going to marry Dongfang Jinsong. And and I think it is interesting and not perhaps admirable that, so it's less that he wanted to die and more that he couldn't imagine living forever alone. Because I think this question of like forever is also important here. It's not just like a mortal lifespan, it's forever.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that. What do you think, Ayani?
No, well, there was something that you said that I wanted to kind of pick up and run with, right? Because one of the things, again, that I like about this drama is the way that it twists the ending away from what you expect is going to happen. And Changhong gets the, what's the term? Is it the Pyrrhic victory in a sense? In that we all know he was failing as a second male lead, but after Orchid pretends to lose her memories and comes back as the goddess, right? The role of the goddess is to marry the god of war, in part to unlock some super extra magic goddess powers to be able to kill the evil god. So he gets to marry the girl that he has loved for centuries, but it's not the girl that he's loved for centuries. And Moon Supreme is like, oh, you bet you must be happy now. You won. You get to marry Orchid. And he's like, what kind of man do you think I am? You know, this is not the woman that you nor I fell in love with. How can you think that I'm happy? You know, especially since she made it very clear that Moon Supreme was the one that she loved, right? So I also was really kind of touched by that and getting to see those additional layers of Changhong as a character. Their wedding, of course, does not go through. It gets interrupted. And it turns out that Orchid can unlock her magical goddess powers with the Moon Supreme also. Didn't 100% explain why, but I'm going to say it's the power of love again. Power of love, power of love.
Checks out.
Checks out. He unlocks also some magical fire too. There was magic happening everywhere. But I really kind of like that reversal of like Changhong getting what he wanted, but it's absolutely 100% not what he wanted at all.
And I think the drama here, sort of connecting this as well to Ronghao and Chidi a little bit, is like drawing a distinction between love and possession. Because Changhong never really wanted to possess Orchid, I think, which is an important distinction. And if he had, he could have, like, Orchid is very clear. It's like I am a weak fairy. If you would like to keep me here or to take me, like, you can. I can't stop you, but I don't want that. So he doesn't do it. So that is very important. But also so Orchid has this speech at the end where she talks about, it's very on the nose, but she talks about the power of love and how it like affects various characters. And there's this shot because
I did like that speech though.
Okay, it's very nice, and it's especially very nice if you've just been weeping for 45 minutes.
Which I was. Really quick, I know we already talked about the ending, but I didn't mention this. I did one of those like open mouth, I'm making noises, I'm sobbing so hard cries. So hearing Orchid talk about people being happy in love was nice and gave my eyes a break. Yeah, but please continue.
But the two characters who don't really get a happy ending are Ronghao and Chidi, the first god of war. And I think they're worth talking about very briefly because Ronghao So Chidi was Ronghao's master and teacher, and she had been dead for 30,000 years, and he resorted to nefarious schemes that we're not going to get into in order to bring her back, but we're
There was
not...
a cloud, an evil cloud involved.
But they were not ethical and involved the murder and torture of many fairies.
Understatement of like the century. He did not look at his book on fairy ethics before engaging with the evil cloud lightning god. Yeah,
Okay. But so he, in his sort of unhinged quest to get Chidi back, didn't think about what she would want and what price she would want him to pay in order to bring her back. And he, in turn, didn't think about what price she would have to pay if she came back under such circumstances. And basically, when she comes back, she is not sane.
No.
She does not have, like, full possession of her faculties. She, like, goes on killing sprees, which she is not about. Because she is a very, like, upright woman.
Fantasizes about killing people, too.
Yeah, she gets the shortest stick out of, like, the whole drama, I think. Because she also, like, for these 30,000 years has been living 1,000 mortal lives that were all deeply shitty.
All terrible. And also come back to haunt her in her dreams. Or not even when she's awake, she hears the screams of her prior selves. And in their various terrible circumstances.
So, like, in the end, Rong Hao decides to kill Chidi, like, at her request, and also to prevent her from being fully taken over by the evil god, and then also uses his the last of his primordial spirit to, like, he can't stop the evil god. The evil god is too powerful, but to, like, prevent the evil god from taking over Chidi. And it's really, I think that's, like, I was way more touched by their deaths than I thought I would be. It was a sort of, like, tragic, sad love that was tragic and sad because the means that Rong Hao was trying to use toward his desired end were not okay.
Yeah. And I also do want to make a point here that I didn't read it as romantic love at all. Chidi had brought...
Yeah, it was like teacher-student love, but, like...
Yeah. Because she had brought him from the mortal realm. He was a boy who lived on the street playing music for money, and he died from hypothermia in the snow. And she brought him to the mortal realm and revived him, actually, and kind of paid a dear price to revive him. The way that the story seemed to say is that the fact that she went through all this shit with the evil cloud god and that Rong Hao was doing all this stuff, it was because she revived him in the first place. And there's always a price to be paid when you bring somebody back from the dead. Unless you're like the goddess and have life powers, right?
But circling back really quickly, the reason why I thought about it is in Orchid's sort of voiceover speech at the end. She also said there's, like, a shot of their graves, and she says, like, love basically brought, like, Rong Hao back from the brink of doing the worst possible, like, someone who had gone astray from doing the worst thing. Like, love is what brought him back from doing that.
Yeah.
I
There's
think
a lot going on in this show.
There is a lot going on in this show. And I think part of the reason it works so well, and I guess we've said that, is that all of these relationships are developing, like, in tandem and, like, side by side. So at the same time as you see Dongfang Qinsong, ostensibly the worst demon, devil person in, like, the entire fairy realm, doing quote unquote evil things, like being, like, very respectful of Orchid, you also see Rong Hao not being very respectful of, like, what Chidi would have wanted. So seeing all these relationships side by side and the ways they compare and the ways that they resonate or don't resonate with each other is really effective. It's really effective storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. We could talk about this show, as I said, for eons, but I think this is a good place for us to kind of pause and stop and wrap up. Any last feelings, thoughts, reactions?
It's just a really good show, and I think it's going to stick with me for a while.
Yeah, I think it'll stick with me too. As a grass, I would like to know what you all think about love between fairy and devil. As I said, I was emotionally destroyed and brought to the brink and did a lot of crying. But we would like to hear what you think about it. And there are a lot of places where you could tell us about those things. Right now, we might be living in the last days of Twitter. But you
Who
can
knows
still
if Twitter will exist by the time we post this?
Who knows? But as of recording, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at SexLoveLit. We're technically on Facebook. I saw someone liked something on Facebook the other day, also at SexLoveLit, but we don't be using Facebook that much. So
if Twitter dies, maybe we'll give it another shot.
yeah, we'll see. But this has been our discussion of love between fairy and devil. Do we know what we have coming up for our next episodes?
We do not.
Well, we're gonna wing it because it's the end of the year and we're both busy people. I do know that I saw that the third season of His Dark Materials is dropping. So we are going to be watching that, and we're definitely going to have a conversation about it, but that might not be the next thing that comes up. We'll see.
Yeah, also keep an eye out for our New Year's episode where we talk about media that we've liked in the past year and media that we're looking forward to in the next that will drop in January.
But this has been Sex Love Literature. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
That one in because I think we gave some description about like tribulations, and I think that's when we're like, they call them the hard times in Mortal Times City or whatever you fucking call them.
The hard times in Mortal Times City. That's better.
So this is why I'm a writer.
Like the fairy guillotine.
Ooh, maybe we stick this at the end of the episode because that was funny.